So after the block, we're going to talk about the piston, connecting rod, and the crankshaft. Let's start with the piston. So first is the piston. The diameter of the piston is nearly the same as the diameter of the cylinder. On the outside of it, we'll notice 3 rings. These are called piston rings. All 3 of them are made out of metal, and they're all larger than the diameter of the piston head. And you'll see how it's springy. The point of these is to create a good seal between the piston and the cylinder wall. The top 2, just slipped off of it. The top 2 are just there to create a seal. It prevents blow-by. Blow-by is when there's an explosion and it would go past the piston. We don't want it to go past the piston at all. We want it to just push the piston on the power stroke. So it creates a tight seal between the piston and the cylinder wall. The third one has little slots in it. Might be a little bit hard to see. It has slots right there. Also, if we were to look at it from underneath, you can see those little holes. So underneath the piston, in the crankcase, is where there's oil. And we need that oil to lubricate the cylinder wall. So oil splashes up through those little holes, comes through this center groove in that third piston ring, and it oils the cylinder wall. On the way up, it oils it. On the way down, just like a windshield wiper or squeegee, it scrapes it clean, because we don't want oil to mix with our gas and fuel and air. So these 3 piston rings create a seal and oil it as the piston rides up and down linearly within the cylinder wall. The next part we're going to talk about is right here. This is the connecting rod. Why is it called the connecting rod? Well, because it connects the piston to the crankshaft. Since it rotates right inside the piston and it rotates on the crankshaft, this is where we convert the linear motion of the piston to the rotary motion of the crankshaft. This is where we take that explosion, contain it, push the piston, and then we're able to take that linear motion and turn it into rotary motion, which is what we want out of the engine. So this is one of the most important parts of the entire engine. These 3 together work to make the engine work in its entirety. On the other end of the connecting rod is the crankshaft. This is one of the, if not the most important part of the engine. We have the piston and the connecting rod attaching right here. We attach this to the camshaft, which controls the valves and the timing. The flywheel is attached to here, which controls the cooling and the ignition. And also, this is the driveshaft. Whatever work we want to get done with the engine, this is where we attach it. We could put a lawnmower blade on here, for instance, or a pulley to control your go-kart. Whatever you're trying to get out of the engine is connected to the crankshaft. There's a small gear on here with timing marks. This timing mark lines up with the camshaft. You want to make sure that the valves and everything is working in time, which we'll talk about the camshaft and the valves in a different video, but that's super important. There's this offset crank. Since it's off to the outer edge, this enables us to turn that linear motion of the piston into rotary motion. So this, since it's offset. And also, you'll see these big metal weights on here. Why do you think those are there? Well, as we think about the 4 strokes of an internal combustion engine, intake, compression, combustion, power, and exhaust, only one of those strokes actually powers the entire engine, right? So on the power stroke, yeah, this is getting pushed. But on the other 3 strokes, it just has to coast. So these weights add extra mass to keep it going. And it keeps it running smoothly. Since it has that extra mass, it's able to coast through the other 3 strokes. So these 3 parts are really at the center of the engine. It really makes it work. It converts that linear motion into rotary motion. We have the piston, with the 3 rings. The top 2 are to create a seal to prevent blow-by, and then that bottom ring is for oiling up that cylinder wall. Connecting rod is named the connecting rod because it connects the piston to the crankshaft. Very important because it allows that linkage to create the rotary motion from the linear motion. And the crankshaft. It has this offset crank to convert the motion. It has a gear for the camshaft. The flywheel attaches to the back. Your drive output is right here. And it has these big weights for extra mass so we can coast through the 3 strokes except for power. Alright, so those are 3 very important parts to an engine.